Hello my beautiful friends, and welcome back to our channel. And today's video, which is gonna be a bit of me talking kind of off the cuff about a fascinating scenario I witnessed this morning, which I would see as people using thought work against other people, but more importantly, against what their goals are. So I'll delve straight into the situation, but this video is probably going to be most relevant for people who've done a little bit of coaching already, people who are understanding the fundamentals of thought work, to be able to really appreciate how this nuance comes up and how it's quite natural to make this mistake, in my opinion. So the situation was, I was sitting in a cafe this morning. I happened to be sitting right next to the owner and this man who had a strong disagreement, so to say. So the owner had asked the gentleman to move his car from a spot that was obstructing a lot of the seating area within this cafe. There was just an outside area. And this man replied to say that the owner was extremely aggressive and rude and forceful in the way that he did that. The owner appeared to be shocked and horrified by this idea that this man had interpreted him as being rude and forceful and aggressive. And so all of the heightened emotions had revealed themselves. Now the owner quickly replied, "That's just how you're perceiving it." And this is what I want to talk about today. Now this might not have been a problem if the other gentleman himself had an awareness of the fact that his interpretation of the world is just that, an interpretation. We're taking in only limited amounts of information that we can with our attention. We don't take in all of the bazillion pieces of information in their completeness, and certainly not on a conscious level. But this man seemed to believe that he was absolutely certainly right, that the owner was indeed aggressive and forceful, and I'm not sure if I'm getting all these adjectives right, but you're getting the picture. And I guess that's the other interesting thing about our brains, is that we're always recalling, we're constructing these pictures and understandings of what's just happened in the immediate past, and our memory of what just happened is also flawed. So not only is our taking in of information flawed and imperfect, incomplete, but then the way that we construct a memory of that is also flawed and incomplete. Now, probably the operative flaw in this situation in terms of a misunderstanding of how our mind works was this man didn't seem to take into account that what he perceived about the business owner didn't directly reflect his intentions. The perception of somebody being aggressive and forceful is subjective in its own right, and it is valid for that individual person, the way that they have interpreted the situation and the way that they feel about the situation. That's valid in itself. But it doesn't mean that it was what was true for the intentions or the actual execution of the behavior by the business owner here. You know, another person standing next to this man witnessing this happening might not have found it to be forceful or aggressive. Another person in that identical situation in a parallel universe, they might not have interpreted that behavior as being aggressive or forceful. So the key here is that that man's experience was completely valid, in that it was his personal experience, his thoughts and his emotions. We can't argue with the fact that he had these thoughts and emotions. But what's not correct is that his thoughts about how this person was behaving is factually, objectively true. His labeling of it being forceful and aggressive is not factually, objectively true. And what was important and interesting in this situation is that the business owner certainly didn't think that that was the case. In his mind, in his thoughts and emotions, he didn't feel that that was true either. He wasn't thinking, or at least suggested that he wasn't thinking, aggressive or forceful thoughts or feeling those emotions that were driving his behaviors. He was saying, that's just how you perceived it. It's not necessarily true. Now, if the business owner's goal was to be right, then he could stand his grounds on that fact, that his intentions weren't to be aggressive or forceful, and that maybe you could survey a couple of the people and be like, these people didn't witness it and they didn't believe that it was aggressive or forceful. But most often what we really want in these situations, sometimes, yeah, we want to be right, but usually that's our ego that wants to be right. Usually what we want is to be understood by the other person. And you know, certainly in the case of a business owner, you don't want somebody who's chosen to come into your space. They've sort of voted for you in this way. They obviously share some interest in whatever you've created. They're potentially a mutual win-win customer. You don't want them to feel like you're telling them they're wrong and you're right, or to feel misunderstood. You want to reach a common misunderstanding. And that's what I wanted to really narrow in on today. Too often when we get in these misunderstandings, what we want most, what our impulse and urges towards in the moment is to be right, because most of us have a lot of trouble with being wrong. For most of us, being wrong is a very bad thing. Certainly being wrong in a way that upsets or hurts or imposes some inconvenience or distress on another person. So if the business owner here was seeking to understand, if the goal was to clarify this misunderstanding that's being revealed and not necessarily just to be right, then we might want to take a different approach to saying, well, that's just how you perceived it. You're wrong in how you perceived it. That's not really what's true. Instead, a more skillful way, a lot of the time, to use thought work in these scenarios is not to say out loud, oh, they're saying that now because that's what they think, that's what they perceived from the situation. From that thought, they felt offended in their emotion, and from that emotion, they acted in a way that was accusing you of being aggressive and forceful. But instead of simply telling them your thoughts are wrong, your interpretation is wrong, we use this understanding that if they're saying that to us in their behavior line, then there's an emotion and a thought up here driving it. We can see, when we think about it that way, we're like, there is a misunderstanding here, because I know my intentions and I did not intend to act that way. I hope that I didn't act that way. I certainly did not intend to act that way. But the place where we can reach for understanding is seeing that their thoughts about the situation are what we can address here. We can address their perception about the situation without simply telling them that they're wrong. When in the moment we get that information when they said, well, you are acting aggressive and forceful, instead of saying, well, that's just what you perceived, we might instead think, that's what they've perceived. I wonder why they perceived that. Now, what were my intentions? What would I like to communicate? What needs to be clarified here? And hey, maybe that was your intention. Clarify that. But this understanding that other people perceive things in a flawed way, just like we do, can be used for a greater goal of reaching understanding. Not just about telling other people that they're wrong or their interpretation is wrong. But it's an amazing tool and skill to be able to clarify these misunderstandings in a very concise way that gets straight to the point. Why did they perceive that differently to what my intention was? My behavior was to say, move your car, mate. What emotion did that come from? Oh, did that come from frustration? Why was I frustrated? Because I was thinking, I have so many orders to go, I don't have enough time. And so you could clarify, my intention was not to be forceful or aggressive, and plus or minus, if you are sorry, I'm sorry that came across in my behaviors. In fact, it's possible I was acting that way, or it's possible what you were seeing was the frustration because I was thinking I didn't have enough time. Are we on the same page? I harbor no aggression towards you. Just something to think about, just a little something that was fresh off the press and interesting to think about. And you know, this is one of the common ways that people who are very empowered by coaching can sometimes try and gift, but also force this way of thinking onto other people. A lot of people aren't able yet to see that their perceptions are flawed. And so telling them something like that can just sound like you're wrong and invalidating them. We want to use our coaching tools and skills to move us towards our actual goal, not to point out when people are right or wrong. And our goal here was understanding, not to make the other person feel wrong so that we could be right and we didn't have to be wrong. Let me know what you think about this one, guys. If you already know that you want to learn more about this way of being showing up in the world, especially when things are hard, especially if you're thinking, gosh, I don't know how I would handle a situation like that. This is where you get coached. It's such a beautiful skill set to learn, to be able to navigate not just the good stuff going towards your goals, but those times where life gets hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. With thought work, it gets a lot easier. So if you know that you want to do this work, I offer no cost, no obligation consults. We just jump on the phone for an hour together. You tell me where you are, where you want to be. I offer you a coaching solution if there is one. Love you guys so much, and I'll see you in my next one.